I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor.
Very, very rocky.
Death by government.
Drain the swamp.
Hello and welcome to a special installment of Liberty Nation's Swamponomics videocast. I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor. This week, America's food supply. Is it poisoning the American people? What was once a subject confined to a bunch of yuppies shopping at Whole Foods and paying $14 for asparagus water, the conversation of the nation's food supply is quickly becoming a mainstream issue in politics and on the election campaign trail. Many busy, stressed, and cash-strapped shoppers might not have the time to comb through the ingredients list of food packaging. If they did, they might be mortified to find out what they are eating or what they are feeding their children. A look at Lunchables package is a daunting task. Reading the ingredients found in a bag of potato chips might be a terrifying ordeal. And what about packaging that contains only a few ingredients like natural flavors and cottonseed oil? Well, we're going to dive a bit deeper into America's food with Liberty Nation's John Klar. He is not only a terrific writer and speaker, but he is also a farmer. So what better person to talk to about this issue than Mr. Klar? So welcome to the program, sir.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
All right, so to start off, last night I was doing my grocery shopping online, and I was offered a discount on Lunchables food for our kids. I don't buy that stuff, but I was so curious to look at what's inside this typical Lunchables with smoked ham, cheese, and a Kit Kat bar. And this is what's inside just a smoked ham: pork, water, salt, flavor, whatever that is,
20 minutes later,
carrageenan, potassium chloride, sodium erythrorbate, sodium nitrite, smoke. Here's what's in the cheese. Cheese, which is comprised of milk ingredients, modified milk ingredients, bacterial culture.
6 hours later,
I don't know what this is. It looks Greek. B-apple 8-inch carotenol, citric acid, potassium sorbate, sodium citrate. And the crackers, you have wheat flour,
3 weeks later,
ammonium bicarbonate, caramel, enzymes, soy lecithin, and sulfites. And then finally, in the Kit Kat bar, we have
2,000 years later,
polyglycerol polysolonate, natural flavor, which I definitely want to touch upon with you on this, wheat flour, sugar, modified palm oil, cocoa, baking soda, soy lecithin, yeast, and natural flavor. When I read these items to you, as a farmer, what's your initial take on this small box of Lunchables that probably would not even satisfy a child's hunger?
Yummy, yummy. I'd go for the cheese. Actually, when you read the cheese ingredients, they weren't so bad. Bacterial cultures are necessary, by the way, to grow cheese, either a mesophilic or thermophilic culture for almost all cheeses, unless you make paneer, because you then need a coagulant and rennet. Actually,
but then what's the B-apple 8 carotenol?
Well, and at least you're not in Europe where they tell you what all the chemicals are with like numbers and letters, and you have to look up like E297. They don't want you to know what's in the food. So as a farmer, I think I have to confess first to you and your viewers that I used to eat that stuff, fed my kids that stuff, and my gradual awakening to what's in my food has also worked in tandem with my improved health and that of my family. And also over the last 20 years, these things being added as ingredients have rapidly increased. You know, this is not the food of my grandmother's or yours. And so, especially with the advent of GMO crops and a lot of new technologies, a lot of the chemicals or things like natural flavors, it is an adversarial battle between those who are producing our processed foods and consumers to conceal from us what's in there. They've designed chemicals to make you eat more than you want. They've designed chemicals to stimulate your taste buds, to make things taste like what they're not. So they can sell you unnatural byproducts like hydrogenated fats and high fructose corn syrup that are not really good for your body and make it palatable and make you eat lots of it. And we haven't even got to the package ingredients. I think you'd be better off eating the box of the Lunchables than giving it to the contents to your children, arguably. And actually, I'm reminded by a presentation before Congress in the 50s, where they did a study that showed that cardboard sprayed with vitamins would grow rats faster than cornflakes. And the industry's response was to start spraying the cornflakes with 12 essential vitamins. They may not be absorbed by your body, they're not natural, but hey, at least it's better than cardboard.
But you do, and that's an interesting point. Though I learned the other day that these food manufacturers, they spray the plastic packaging that stores the cereal to make it last longer and seem more fresh. But I'm just so curious, what the heck is that spray made out of then that people are inevitably going to consume?
Well, the numbers of chemicals is so huge that I think it can make many people feel overwhelmed and resign themselves to not read it anymore because it's like a horror movie. The big additive that you're actually hinting at as well is BPA, which I'm not
Yes.
sure if that's work on the plastic, but that's what's in almost all cans. You know, a lot of times when you buy like Amy's Organics and others, you're simply buying something that has not had those preservatives added to your children's stomach, where it has impacts on our gut flora. And so we're learning more about this right at the same time that chemical manufacturers are concocting new things to add to the food. We're in a battle. We're in a battle over health. We're in a battle over affordability. We're in a battle over food security. And I'm glad that you and others are starting to look at those labels. They do not want you to look at those labels, and they've worked very hard to obfuscate the contents. And a natural flavor can include a lot of things that are not natural flavors. Things that sound innocuous are now used by, in compliance with federal laws, these captured regulatory agents, captured by large industrial food entities and more chemical companies. More and more of our food is produced dependent on chemicals, without which our yields would just plummet, particularly glyphosate and a lot of herbicides and pesticides that are not good to be in your food. So, by the way, I want to point out to your listeners, the first place to look for produce is Environmental Working Group every year, nonprofit. They do a list of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So you can start to learn about what things to watch for, particularly pesticide residues in your foods. And from there are many other resources so that we can start to equip ourselves as consumers so that when you read that label, you actually decipher that language so you can translate it to for your health of your family.
So, okay, so there's lots to unpack there here, but the first one I guess to talk about is the natural flavors part. When you read that, you say, "Oh, natural flavor. Okay, this must be derived from some plant or from fruit or vegetable, whatever the case." But then I learned that you can call it natural flavor because, yeah, fine, it may have a portion of it derived from, let's say, a plant, but then the rest could be just filled with chemicals. Is that correct?
That is correct. In fact, a natural flavoring, I think, can have as many as like 120 some ingredients in it. They're not listed for you. You have to be a Sherlock Holmes and a scientist to track down. And actually, again, you can't actually know. And the closer you are to your food, your backyard being the closest, or your neighbor farmer, the more you can actually find out what's in it with some, hopefully, reliability.
Now my question is, so we have mass production in the United States and the whole global economy to feed billions of people. Now, when it comes to spraying with pesticides, is the main purpose to produce as much food as possible, or is it also, as you alluded to, that satisfying people's taste buds, changing how they eat? I mean, if you didn't use all those pesticides, would you be able to produce as much food as the United States does today?
The biggest reason is productivity gains, yes, profits, which can be very narrow margins. I believe I read a study recently suggesting that the use of atrazine on corn in America increases our annual crop production by 4%. Many other countries in the world don't use atrazine. 4% of 92 million acres of corn is a lot of productivity lost. Similar analyses could be employed for neonicotinoids and other pesticides. But in the case of atrazine, I think we really have to go. Atrazine is an endocrine disruptor. It mimics estrogen. We seem to be having some problems, particularly with obesity, where we store estrogen, and these false disruptors. They're disruptive to our, not just to our hormones, our sexual hormones, but our reproductive systems. More and more evidence is showing us that these are damaging. So when you weigh the productivity benefits of, say, atrazine against the potential human impacts, you could do the same analysis with glyphosate, with any number of chemicals. The EPA has now identified over 12,000 forever chemicals that when I was young, we were told, don't worry about nonstick frying pans, they're fine. Now we're told these chemicals last in the environment essentially forever because they don't know how long. It might only be 400 years, but we haven't had a long enough testing span to find out and that they stay in your body forever.
One of the things that really opened my eyes, I was watching this professor talk, and he's an agricultural professor, and he was discussing how farmers they spray their russet potatoes and with pesticides, and they spray them so much that they have to wait 5 days before they can go into the field and touch these russet potatoes. And guess who uses these russet potatoes? McDonald's. And then
McDonald's.
when you go to the list of ingredients in the McDonald's food, you see beef flavor. Why is there beef flavor with the McDonald's French fries?
You're going to ask me about the workings of the corporate mind. I mean, I understand some vegetarians were very upset about that beef flavoring, so that's why I smile. Then we don't do McDonald's anyway. The russet potato is actually a really good example of the demands, ultimately, not just of corporate America, but maybe consumers. The russets are used because they're really long and they're consistent. The chemical applications you referred to, I forget the particularly obnoxious and horrible fumes and you can't even be around them. I think also when they're then stored and aerated in the warehouses, you have to vent them very well or suffer the consequences. And of course, this makes one think also, in case your listeners don't know, of glyphosate used not as a weed killer early in the season, but as a desiccant just prior to harvest, particularly in potatoes and wheat, because you increase the yields again. So if you spray your potato crop with glyphosate, which kills everything that's not GMO modified to withstand that glyphosate, then it kills all the potatoes. And now 3 days later, you're harvesting them. That's very different from spraying it in the springtime, killing weeds when your corn is only 2 inches high. So we have a lot of chemicals that are put in there. It's always about increasing productivity, but it's also always about pleasing the customer. So we have to, so for instance, how about organic apples? They may have blemishes on them. Give me a nice, pretty apple that looks like the Walt Disney movie with the witch. It's perfect. It's unblemished, only hidden within, including in the skin. You probably should skin it if it's not an organic apple. Apples are one of the biggest offenders, full of chemicals. So maybe we have to re-examine how we consumers demand our food. I don't think that we can blame corporate America for feeding us soft drinks. We love them. If we stopped drinking them, maybe they would give us milk and orange juice. So we have a responsibility in our consumer choices. So rather than just, yell at McDonald's, but we don't make those choices until we know what's actually in the French fries. And as far as the beef extract, I believe it's for flavoring. I thought they discontinued that because of complaints, but I'm sure it's for flavoring. We all like stuff that tastes good.
Now, I don't know if our viewers who watch the Conservative 5 TV, in between our segments, when John is on and Dave Patterson is on, we have conversations about organic produce. And our Dave Patterson, he's against it, doesn't really care about organic, but John and I, we're definitely on the organic train. But for viewers who are unaware, what exactly is the difference between, let's say, the organic apples and just a regular plain apple you find at the grocery store?
Well, I think it's funny you mentioned that. I feel bad. I've been pounding on Dave and playfully. It's not really a discussion. It's been a gang up on poor Dave, but I understand Dave's sentiment. He's questioning whether a lot of this is kind of a boondoggle or a lark, and actually defining these things. And as in my book, I try to. How about we define regenerative agriculture? I think we have to look at it as a spectrum. The idea of organic is that it's free of man-made chemicals, additives that are unhealthy and unnatural, not found in nature. That's one end of the spectrum. Now, in between, a lot of conventional farming, it's hard to be completely free of all chemicals. We're organic farmers, but we still use certain wormers and things that we can't replace naturally. So there's a spectrum. And a local conventionally cropped food might be less deleterious to the environment than an organic, shipped from Chile or China. There are a lot of environmental impacts. But ultimately, what we're talking about organics, is food that is unadulterated by these chemicals, which also, by the way, are in the air and in the water, and they come from all other industries besides agriculture. So, the idea is to limit or reduce the amount of harmful carcinogens and endocrine disruptors and other toxins that are very obviously in our industrial food. And that's what we would say is not organic. And I would say to Dave, do you really want to give your grandchildren grapes with the residues of 18 different pesticides on them? And I think Dave would agree, no, I probably wouldn't, regardless of how we label these things.
I find just the quality of the food completely, such a difference between the organic and non-organic. Just the other day, I thought for the heck of it, I'm going to buy organic corn. It was actually cheaper than the green giant version, so I bought the frozen corn and I ate it. Wow, is it just my mind playing tricks on me? Am I lying to myself? But this tastes completely delicious and it tastes fresh and it doesn't taste hard or what it's hard to put my finger on it. Same with the raspberries. We've been buying organic raspberries for years now, and you buy an organic raspberry, it lasts a couple of days. But you buy a non-organic raspberry, you put it in the fridge, it lasts for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and still looks great. But the organic raspberry, you have to eat within a day or two, otherwise it just boom, it goes bad. And of course, there's a cost to it, and the premium you pay for organic is quite sizable. I was walking by a burger joint the other day, and it said that okay, we sell our burgers, no antibiotics, no chemicals, no additives, all that stuff. But the premium is a lot higher, and I just find it astounding how, from what I gather, maybe of course you know better than I do, but if I'm using fewer chemicals in my cows, I'm injecting less antibiotics, I'm injecting all these fewer chemicals and additives in my food. Would it require less input costs to produce a hamburger than would if I'm just injecting with all these chemicals, or am I missing something?
You've asked me a question that's compounded. I'm going to answer all three in a compound answer. First of all, the reason it tastes better is you're vegetarian and you delude yourself that what you're eating tastes better. But no, actually, it does taste better. As I read about in my book, not really plugging it, but I was a lawyer, a tax lawyer, and I got into farming because I got really sick with Lyme disease. And the more I started raising food, this was my first wake-up call. I became woke. And I said, wait a minute, this chicken that we raised tastes so much better and is so much more flavorful and tender than anything I ever had in a store. What am I missing? I thought that it was going to be tough and more difficult. And the more we did that with our veggies and actually know what fresh food really tastes like, the more you find that your body naturally knows the difference. And so that's what you're alluding to. It's true across the board. And of course, preservatives are a big problem. If you're going to pick things early, losing a lot of their nutritional value, and then spray them with chemicals to ensure that they can last a long time on that long trip, particularly things like strawberries, then you're eating more than what meets the eye. As far as the cost premium, here's the answer. There are a lot of technological advances used in industrial agriculture that do reduce costs. And if you're going to eliminate them, it's going to be more manual labor. The inputs are actually cost saving. The food that is processed is actually cheaper produced. As we've discussed, you have higher yields because you have atrazine in it and neonicotinoids in it. You have higher yields because you use GMO crops and you sprayed everything with glyphosate. You're destroying the soil's microbiome, increasing erosion, destroying water, but hey, it still tastes the same, does it? Ultimately, there's another thing going on here, which I think Americans need to look at really hard. We are subsidizing these very cropping technologies. We subsidize GMO crops. We are therefore indirectly really subsidizing grains made with all these chemicals that are fed to animals. And so I don't have to buy that grain, for instance, to use cows for an example. But we're subsidizing to the tunes of billions and billions of dollars. And one of the things I advocate in my book is why don't we eliminate the subsidies of these large monocultures that are destroying us and the environment, all in the name of profit? It's a scam. Just get rid of it and let me as an organic farmer compete with you toe to toe. We've destroyed small farms because we have subsidized industrial farms. I could have had a V8 and it could have been organic. But instead, it's a V8 with listing about 800 chemicals in it. And it doesn't end well for us. So unless we take control of knowing what's in our food and having that influence our purchase decisions, pretty soon we'll just be eating little chunks of tofu saturated in gasoline, so it won't go off on the shelf. But anyway, I don't want to offend Dave.
And some cockroaches too in there. Don't forget that cockroaches. But okay, so
they'll be labeled as natural ingredients, so you won't know.
So before that, We can talk about this. I could talk about this for a long time. Sure. Oh, I would love to pick your brain on this issue, but we're limited time. So before I let you go, my key question is here. So how do we change this environment? I hate government. I never advocate for government intervention here. So is this a matter of just consumer demand, consumers becoming more knowledgeable at it? You look at Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, they transitioned to green farming within a year or two. They got top ESG scores. What happens now? Shortages, starvation, it's a humanitarian crisis. So how do you take this balanced approach between feeding the public, giving them healthy, good food, and not having government? It's just let the market handle it.
It's a really important question, and because here's the thing, the purists or extremists on both sides, the industrial agriculture industry will tell you that you can't feed the world without them. And Sri Lanka would be one of their examples. The organics people would say, well, you're destroying the planet. You must only eat organics or else you're part of the problem. You know what? As I mentioned, the solution's in the middle. Guess what? Both sides are right. We cannot feed the world right now solely by organics. We can transition back. See, we left the garden in. We left God's provision, if you will, nature's provision. We have Frankensteinianly, if that's not a word, modified to try to keep squeezing more productivity every time at the expense of human and animal and environmental health. So we need to reverse that. And we've been doing this for 80 years, the so-called green revolution, without ever even looking at the gut microbiome or the soil microbiome. We're like, wow, look at that. There are bugs in there. And it's not just a substrate that we can spray chemicals on. We're going to replace cows with synthetic fertilizers made from natural gas. No, we don't want to go the way of Sri Lanka. Having said that, there are other nuances there. That was a very abrupt, sudden, and perhaps corrupt shut off, but it shows us what happens. See, by spraying the soil with nitrogen, we're replacing the natural functions of the bacteria that actually feed the soil and sequester nitrogen from the air. And we're killing the soil. So short term, it looks like we're increasing productivity, and we are. Over time, we have to apply more and more chemicals, more and more pesticides and herbicides because of super weeds and super bugs that, lo and behold, adapt and evolve very quickly to these technologies. And then we're back to what? Using DDT? It is breaking down. So it's urgent that we transition. It is not something to be done on a grand scale by government overnight. It takes the individual action. This is back to the question you asked. How do we change it? Individual purchasing prices, not taking your food for granted. It is artificially cheap. You should be paying more for your food. As a function of what we pay for food, I think it's about 9%. It might be up to 10% now for America. Compare that to 1850. Compare that to just about every culture in history. They valued their food and made it a priority. We spend more on big houses and big cars, and then we eat crappy drive-through food and destroy our bodies in our big houses and our big cars. This is a value system. We need to wake up, and it will separate the men from the boys, if you will, because over time, the people that waken up to this and feed their children healthy food are going to literally survive and reproduce, and the others are going to die young with cancer or something else, health related. It's just the evidence is in, and you see it.
All right, so on that note, I'm going to grab the Pepto-Bismol after eating a chemical-filled hamburger. Thank you, John, very much for appearing on Swamponomics TV.
Thanks for having me. I'm sorry we didn't get to talk about the inflation part. Maybe we'll have to go back again.
In January 2023, Time magazine wrote an article titled, "Why Ultra-Processed Foods Are So Bad for You." In August 2024, the same publication produced an article called, "What if ultra-processed foods aren't as bad as you think?" Ouch. We know that a Big Mac or a Whopper is bad for you, but we can't help but eat them, whether to satisfy our taste buds or because we are too lazy to cook ourselves. But are we insulting ourselves by imbibing on a package of chips and drinking a plastic bottle of soda? Of course, even if you try to eat healthy, researchers are continually finding foods, from eggs to rice, that contain foreign substances that are harmful to you. The water we drink is impacting our children. A new report by the Department of Health and Human Services National Toxicology Program has raised questions if there is too much fluoride in the water and if it is truly lowering kids' IQ. Indeed, it is a difficult balancing act, something that John Klar alluded to, between feeding a growing population at a cheap price and providing the consuming public with healthy foods. Does anyone have the answer at a time when food inflation is above 20%? Until there is a solution in the meantime, we will need some weight loss pills after gorging on Big Macs that trigger heartburn, leading to the consumption of Tums and Pepto-Bismol as we sit on our comfortable sofas, scrolling through our phones and watching videos of people eating Tide Pods or pretending to be non-playable characters. Not only are we destroying our bodies, we are harming our minds. That's it from this week. Please read my full Swamponomics column on the pages of LibertyNation.com and be sure to check out my catalog of previous Swamponomics TV videos and interviews. LibertyNation.com does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. Thank you. I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor.
Very, very rocky.
Death by government.
Drain the swamp.